They saw the wheelchair first. Always the wheelchair. The man sitting in it became invisible, reduced to whispered pity and awkward stares. But when three armed men stormed Riverside Mall that Tuesday afternoon, the shoppers who had spent months avoiding eye contact with the disabled veteran were about to discover that losing your legs doesn't mean losing your fight. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen hadn't walked in 4 years, but he was about to remind everyone that a warrior's strength was never in his legs. Welcome to Stories that honor those who served. If you believe heroes come in all forms, subscribe to support more content like this. Today's story will change how you see strength forever. The automatic doors of Riverside Mall parted with their familiar whoosh as Marcus Chen rolled his wheelchair through the entrance. Tuesday afternoons were his preference: fewer crowds, less noise, and most importantly, fewer stares. His routine was methodical. Pharmacy first for his medication, then the food court for coffee, followed by people watching from his usual spot near the fountain. It wasn't much of a life, but it was his life now. Marcus had been coming to this mall for 18 months, ever since he'd moved to Millbrook, following his medical discharge. The small Tennessee town offered cheap housing and VA services, but not much else. Certainly not understanding. To the locals, he was simply the guy in the wheelchair, an object of pity to some, invisible to most. The Riverside Mall reflected the town itself, aging, tired, slowly dying. Half the storefront stood empty, their security gates pulled down, like closed eyelids. The remaining shops survived on habit rather than enthusiasm. GameStop, Radio Shack, a struggling Barnes & Noble, the kind of businesses that Amazon was systematically destroying. Marcus navigated through the scattered Tuesday crowd with practiced efficiency. A mother pulled her toddler closer as he passed, whispering something about being careful. An elderly man nodded respectfully, probably a Vietnam vet recognizing a kindred spirit. A group of teenagers barely glanced up from their phones, lost in their digital worlds. At 32, Marcus looked older than his years. The desert had aged him, and the explosion that destroyed his legs had aged him more. His black hair was already showing silver at the temples, and lines mapped his face like tactical positions on a battlefield. His upper body remained powerful from years of physical therapy and weight training, the only fitness routine available to him now. The pharmacy was his first stop, as always. The young technician, a girl named Ashley, greeted him with the overly cheerful tone people used around the disabled. "How are we doing today, Mr. Chen?" she asked, her voice pitched higher than necessary. "Fine," Marcus replied, accepting his monthly supply of pain medication, sleeping pills, and antidepressants. The chemical cocktail that kept him functional, if not happy. Ashley's smile faltered slightly at his curt response, but he'd learned that encouraging conversation only led to awkward questions about his service or well-meaning, but useless advice about staying positive. The food court occupied the mall center, a dated collection of chain restaurants surrounding plastic tables and uncomfortable chairs. Marcus ordered his usual black coffee from the teenage barista at Java Junction, a kid named Tyler who always looked terrified when serving him. Whether the fear stemmed from his wheelchair or the intensity in his eyes, Marcus couldn't tell. Probably both. Finding his preferred table near the fountain required strategic thinking. It offered clear sight lines to all entrances, positioned him with his back against a solid wall, and kept him out of the main traffic flow. Old habits died hard, even when the battlefield was a shopping mall in Tennessee. The fountain burbled quietly beside him, its penny-filled basin reflecting the overhead lights. Children occasionally tossed coins while making wishes, their parents ensuring they stayed well away from the man in the wheelchair. Marcus had stopped making wishes years ago. Reality had proven more reliable than hope. As he settled into his surveillance position, Marcus's trained eye automatically cataloged the mall's security features. 2 guards, an overweight man named Patterson who spent more time on his phone than patrolling, and a young woman named Rivera who seemed competent but inexperienced. For main entrances, plus emergency exits he'd memorized during his first week of visits. The security office was located near Sears, its cameras providing decent coverage but obvious blind spots. Marcus knew these details not because he planned anything, but because his mind couldn't stop analyzing threats. 4 years after the IED explosion that ended his military career, he still thought like a soldier. Still saw cover and concealment, choke points and kill zones. The difference was that now he was just a guy in a wheelchair, and his observations were worthless. The Starbucks barista, a college-age girl named Emma, occasionally glanced his way with curious eyes. She'd been working there for 6 months, and Marcus could see her building up courage for conversation. He hoped she wouldn't. Experience had taught him that civilian attempts at understanding military service usually ended in frustration for everyone involved. A maintenance worker named Rodriguez nodded respectfully as he passed. Another veteran, Marcus suspected. There was a recognition between those who'd served, even without words. Rodriguez kept the mall clean and functional, invisible labor that kept society running. Marcus understood invisibility. The food court's ambient noise provided cover for his thoughts. Music played from hidden speakers, mixing with conversation, cash registers, and the fountain's gentle splash. Tuesday afternoons brought a predictable crowd. Elderly mall walkers getting exercise, mothers with strollers killing time, teenagers skipping school, and workers on lunch breaks. Peaceful. Routine. Safe. Marcus checked his watch. 2:47 p.m. He'd been here for 23 minutes, right on schedule. His coffee was still warm, his pain medication was holding, and the crowd was typical for this time of day. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Just another boring afternoon in a boring town, in a boring life. That's when he saw them. 3 men entered through the main entrance, moving with purpose that immediately triggered Marcus's threat assessment protocols. Their clothing was wrong. Heavy jackets in 70-degree weather. Their positioning was tactical, spread formation, eyes scanning for cameras and security. Their body language screamed danger to anyone trained to recognize it. Marcus felt his pulse quicken for the first time in months. His hands moved instinctively to check for weapons that weren't there, armor that he no longer wore. 4 years of civilian life hadn't dulled his combat instincts, just made them irrelevant. Until now. The men split up immediately after entering. One headed toward the anchor stores, another toward the service corridors, the third toward the food court. Classic 3-point infiltration. Marcus's mind raced through tactical possibilities, while his body remained perfectly still. He was just another disabled veteran having coffee. Nothing threatening about him. The lead man reached the food court, and Marcus got his first clear look. Mid-30s, athletic build, facial hair that looked deliberately unkempt rather than natural. His eyes swept the area professionally, cataloging exits and civilians. When his gaze passed over Marcus, it showed no recognition, no concern. Just another broken soldier in a wheelchair. The mistake they were about to make was assuming the wheelchair meant helpless. Marcus's training kicked in automatically. Range to target, 47 meters. Available cover, food court tables and support pillars. Civilian count, approximately 37, including 6 children. Potential weapons, none immediately available. Tactical disadvantage, significant, but not impossible. The man in the food court received some kind of signal, a text or earpiece communication. He nodded slightly and began moving toward the jewelry store at the mall's far end. His companions emerged from their positions, converging on the same target. Marcus realized what was happening 30 seconds before anyone else in the mall. This was a robbery. Professional, coordinated, and about to turn violent. The jewelry store, Precious Moments, was owned by an elderly couple, the Krishnans, who'd been kind to Marcus during his visits. They'd never pitied him or treated him like an invalid. Just normal human courtesy that had meant more than they knew. Now they were about to become victims. Marcus faced an impossible choice. Call 911 and hope police arrived in time, or intervene himself and risk civilian lives. The smart move was to stay out of it. Let the professionals handle it. He was disabled, unarmed, and legally had no authority to act. But those 3 men were walking toward innocent people with violence in their eyes, and Marcus Chen had spent 10 years of his life sworn to protect others from exactly this kind of threat. The wheelchair suddenly felt less like a prison and more like a weapon. The robbery began with professional efficiency. The 3 men entered Precious Moments jewelry simultaneously, their heavy jackets concealing what Marcus assumed were firearms. From his position 70 meters away, You watched the scene unfold with crystal clarity, while other shoppers remained oblivious to the drama. Mrs. Krishnan was showing diamond earrings to a young couple when the door chime announced the men's arrival. Her husband emerged from the back room, probably responding to some instinct that something wasn't right. The customers, a man and woman in their 20s, turned toward the door with curious expressions that quickly transformed into terror. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Hands raised, backs against the display cases. Mrs. Krishnan's mouth forming a silent scream. The lead robber's arm extending, presumably holding a weapon. Classic armed robbery dynamics playing out in real time. The other shoppers in the mall's main corridor began to notice something was wrong. A woman with a stroller hurried past the jewelry store, glancing nervously through the windows. Two teenagers stopped their conversation, phones raised to record whatever was happening inside. The elderly mall walkers clustered together, uncertain whether to flee or investigate. Marcus made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He wasn't going to call for help and wait. He wasn't going to hope someone else would intervene. He was going to do what he'd been trained to do: neutralize the threat and protect the innocent. The problem was that his legs were gone, his weapons were gone, and his authority was gone. All he had left was his mind, his training, and 47 pounds of aluminum wheelchair that suddenly seemed very small against 3 armed men. But Marcus Chen had learned something during 2 deployments to Iraq that most people never understood. Weapons were just tools. The real weapon was the warrior spirit, and no IED could take that away. He began moving toward the jewelry store, his wheels silent on the mall's polished floors. To casual observers, he looked like any other shopper drawn by curiosity to the disturbance. His pace was steady but not hurried, his expression concerned but not panicked. Just a disabled veteran investigating some commotion. The security guards remained oblivious. Patterson was still focused on his phone near the east entrance. Rivera was making rounds near the anchor stores, too far away to respond quickly. The mall's PA system played gentle music, unaware that violence was unfolding beneath its artificial calm. As Marcus approached, the situation inside the jewelry store escalated. Through the windows, he could see the lead robber becoming agitated, his weapon, now clearly visible as a pistol, waving erratically. Mrs. Krishnan was fumbling with the register while her husband stood protectively in front of the young customers. The second robber was smashing display cases, grabbing jewelry with mechanical efficiency. The third man, Marcus realized, was serving as lookout near the store entrance. This was the key vulnerability in their operation. Lookouts expected threats to come from police, security, or other armed individuals. They didn't expect threats to come from disabled veterans in wheelchairs. Marcus stopped 15 feet from the store entrance, close enough to act, but far enough to avoid immediate suspicion. He pulled out his phone, pretending to make a call while actually activating the voice recorder. If he didn't survive the next few minutes, someone needed evidence of what happened. The third robber glanced at him briefly, dismissing him as irrelevant. Perfect. Marcus began his approach, rolling slowly toward the entrance while maintaining his phone conversation facade. "Yeah, I'm at the mall," he said loudly enough to be heard. "Just picking up some medication from the pharmacy." Normal civilian behavior. Nothing threatening about a guy in a wheelchair making a phone call. 20 feet. 15 feet. 10 feet. The lookout was positioned just inside the store entrance, his attention split between the street outside and the robbery inside. He held a pistol low against his leg, trying to keep it concealed from passing shoppers. His positioning was tactically sound but not perfect. He was focused on external threats, not internal ones. Marcus reached the store entrance and made his move. Years of physical therapy had made his upper body incredibly strong. The wheelchair's momentum, combined with 47 pounds of aluminum and Marcus's own weight, created a battering ram that caught the lookout completely off guard. The impact drove the man backward into a display case, his weapon clattering across the floor as glass exploded around them. The sound shattered the jewelry store's deadly quiet. The lead robber spun toward the commotion, his weapon swinging away from the hostages for the first time since the robbery began. Marcus used that split second to grab the fallen pistol, his muscle memory taking over despite 4 years of civilian life. Gun on the ground. Now, Marcus's command voice carried all the authority of his military training, even from a wheelchair. The lead robber hesitated, confused by this unexpected development. In that moment of hesitation, Marcus put 2 rounds center mass, dropping him instantly. The second robber, still behind the display cases, raised his weapon toward Marcus. But Marcus had already repositioned, using his wheelchair's mobility to create an angle that put the jewelry cases between them. The robbers' shots shattered diamonds and gold, but missed their target. Mrs. Krishnan and the young customers dropped to the floor as Marcus and the remaining robber exchanged fire across the store. Marcus's position near the entrance gave him superior cover and angles, while the robber was trapped in the narrow space behind the counter. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it ended, 2 robbers were dead and the third was unconscious from his collision with the display case. The Krishnans were shaken but unharmed, and the young couple emerged from behind the counter without a scratch. Marcus sat in his wheelchair amid the chaos, the pistol still in his hands, waiting for the police, who were undoubtedly en route. Around him, scattered jewelry caught the overhead lights like fallen stars, and broken glass crunched under the wheels of approaching shoppers who finally understood what had happened. The disabled veteran they'd pitied and ignored had just saved 4 lives, with skills they never knew he possessed. The aftermath unfolded with predictable chaos. Mall security arrived first, Patterson huffing and puffing from his sprint across the mall, Rivera close behind with her hand on her radio. Both stopped short when they saw Marcus sitting calmly in his wheelchair, the pistol resting on his lap, surrounded by the debris of combat. "Jesus Christ," Patterson whispered, surveying the scene. 2 bodies, 1 unconscious suspect, shattered glass everywhere, and a man in a wheelchair who looked like he was waiting for a bus rather than sitting in the middle of a crime scene. "Sir, I need you to put the weapon down slowly," Rivera said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. She was young but professional, treating Marcus like any other armed individual rather than a disabled veteran. He appreciated that. Marcus complied immediately, placing the pistol on the floor and raising his hands. 2 suspects down, 1 unconscious. For civilians safe. I'm former military. No threat to anyone except the bad guys. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. The mall's corridors filled with curious shoppers and employees drawn by the sound of gunfire. Cell phone cameras recorded everything, turning Marcus's moment of action into tomorrow's viral video. Mrs. Krishnan crawled toward Marcus, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching out to touch his arm. "They were going to kill us. I could see it in their eyes." The young couple, introduced themselves as Jake and Amy, engaged to be married, approached more cautiously. "Sir, you saved our lives," Jake said, his voice shaking with residual adrenaline. "We don't know how to thank you." Marcus looked at them all, these innocent people who'd been seconds away from becoming statistics, and felt something he hadn't experienced in 4 years. Purpose. Not the artificial purpose of physical therapy or job training, but the real thing. The reason he'd become a soldier in the first place. "Just doing my job," he said quietly, though he knew that wasn't entirely true. His job had ended when that IED stole his legs. This was something else. Something deeper. Police flooded the mall within minutes, followed by paramedics, FBI agents, and a small army of reporters. Marcus found himself at the center of a media storm he'd never wanted, fielding questions about his service, his disability, and his actions in the jewelry store. Detective Sarah Morrison, a 15-year veteran of the Millbrook PD, took point on the investigation. She questioned Marcus with professional thoroughness while treating him with the respect due a fellow warrior. Yes, he'd taken the weapon from the first suspect. Yes, he'd fired in self-defense and defense of others. Yes, he understood his rights. "Staff Sergeant Chen," she said finally, using his military rank rather than Mr. Chen like everyone else. This was clean. Textbook defensive shooting. "But I have to ask, why didn't you wait for us to arrive?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Because they weren't going to wait, Detective. Robbers like that, they go in expecting to kill witnesses. Those people had maybe 2 minutes before this turned into a massacre." Morrison nodded, understanding the tactical reality. For what it's worth, You did good work in there. Those families are going home tonight because of you." The FBI agents were less sentimental, but equally professional. They confirmed that the 3 suspects were part of a traveling robbery crew responsible for at least 6 similar crimes across the Southeast. Professional criminals, with extensive records and no compunction about killing witnesses. Marcus's intervention had likely prevented a multiple homicide. As the official questioning concluded, Marcus faced an unexpected challenge: the media attention. Local reporters had become national reporters, and his story was spreading across social media like wildfire. Disabled veteran stops mall robbery. Wheelchair warrior saves lives. Hero in a wheelchair. The headlines made him uncomfortable. He wasn't a hero, just a soldier who'd done his job when circumstances required it. But as he watched the Krishnans reunite with their adult children, as he saw Jake and Amy holding each other with tears of relief, Marcus began to understand that his service hadn't ended with his medical discharge. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, the psychiatrist who'd been treating his PTSD since his arrival in Millbrook, visited him at the police station. She'd seen the news reports and wanted to check on his mental state after the trauma of combat. "How are you feeling, Marcus?" she asked, studying his face for signs of psychological distress. "Like myself again," he answered honestly. "For the first time in 4 years, I feel like myself." Dr. Reyes nodded, recognizing the significance of that statement. They'd spent countless sessions discussing his feelings of uselessness, his struggle to find purpose in civilian life. Today had changed something fundamental in his psychological landscape. As the evening wore on, Marcus was finally released from police custody. No charges would be filed. The shooting was clearly justified. But as he prepared to leave the station, he was approached by Captain James Rodriguez from the local Army Reserve Unit. "Staff Sergeant Chen, I've been following your story today. I wanted to personally thank you for your actions and extend an invitation. Our unit conducts security training for local businesses and schools. We could use someone with your experience and tactical knowledge." Marcus looked at the captain, seeing not pity or charity but genuine respect and a real job offer. "I'm disabled, sir. I can't do regular soldier things." "Son, what you did today wasn't regular soldier things. That was extraordinary soldier things. The wheelchair doesn't change the fact that you're still a warrior." As Marcus rolled through the mall parking lot toward his modified van, he passed the jewelry store one more time. The crime scene tape was gone, but the memory lingered. For people had walked out of that store alive because a man in a wheelchair had refused to accept that his fighting days were over. The headlines would fade, the interviews would end, and eventually the media would move on to the next story. But Marcus Chen had learned something today that no IED could take away. A warrior's strength was never in his legs. It was in his heart, his training, and his willingness to stand, or sit, between evil and innocence. Tomorrow he would call Captain Rodriguez and discuss the training position. Tonight, he would sleep without nightmares for the first time in 4 years, knowing that his service to others wasn't finished. The wheelchair was just transportation. The warrior inside was still very much alive. If this story touched you and you found something meaningful in it, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories like this.